Vic, you've done so much research for this episode.
I have.
Vic messaged me the other day going, I've got a present for you. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, don't get too excited. It was a finance book. I was like,
It was okay.
Never
Admittedly,
again.
I reckon once you start reading it, you'll be like, wow, this is actually quite good content. Mm-hmm. Why can't you talk?
apple on my nose.
Just eating an apple. Sorry, everyone. The author is called Scott Galloway, and I've read so many of his books. He's done some great books. And a friend of mine was like, hey, he's speaking in London. Do you want to come along? I was like, you don't have to ask me twice. I was there, front row, pen and paper, trying to get a signature afterwards.
Did you actually?
Yeah. And I spoke to him. I was like, we've got a podcast. I was like fangirling like big time. Kind
did
of
you
like you
say?
at the expo, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. And I was like, oh, the poor guy. You could just tell he was doing what he had to do in terms of
Being polite.
And being like,
How did you try and sell the podcast?
I was like, we've got a podcast and everything that you said at this talk resonated. Like we say exactly the same things about the conversation about money and how important it is. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, we kind of like to think of ourselves as the call her daddy of finance. And he lost it. He laughed. I was like, I can't go in there and just be like, I'm a big fan. Can I get your signature? He's not going to remember me. So I went in.
I think it's quite bold, actually. And I'm wondering if we should change our bio.
Yeah. I was like, we're the call her daddy of finance. And he laughed and loved it. And then.
Do you think we need to talk about penises more to be able to claim that? I feel like she gets into sex chat a lot.
I think she started like that. I mean, we just did a sex talks podcast.
True. Oh my God.
Yeah. We are the call her daddy.
Okay,
Oh, finance.
all right.
Huh. Yes. Anyway, and then afterwards I emailed him asking, because he said, I asked him, would you be interested in being on our podcast? And he was like, admittedly, he's not our target demographic. He's a 60-year-old white male, but he was funny. He didn't beat around the bush, which a lot of people sometimes do when they talk about money and finance. It's like, they just don't give it to you straight. He gave it to us straight. Anyway, I emailed him, kind of like what you did with Elizabeth Day. And I said, hey, the title was Call Her Daddy of Finance.
Nice.
Yeah. I still haven't had a response.
Oh.
Yeah. That's all right.
It's okay. You got to shoot your shot, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, this episode is kind of going to be touching on a few things that he mentioned in that event and just a few things that resonated with me and I really want to get your thoughts on, and just the way he articulated things. I was like, wow, that's so true. So anyway, he is a professor of marketing at NYU Stern Business School. He's an entrepreneur, he's an author, podcast. He's got his own podcast, hence why, similarities. I'm trying to gel on podcast chat. And he's
You're
just
like, what mics do you use?
I should have. We use Rodecaster Pros.
Do you use Riverside?
I said to him, I was like, I've got a podcast. And he goes, oh, podcasting's so hard. And I wanted to be like real big dick energy and be like, no, it's not really because my content.
You should have really just hoed me out and be like,
I know I should have.
Sophie can help.
Yeah. Should get you some great sponsorships so you can edit the podcast. I should have actually. Next time.
That would have been, that's a good opportunity.
I know.
That's like networking 101. I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yes, I know. So yes, anyway, he has released a new book called The Algebra of Wealth, A Simple Formula for Success. Not the best title, but.
Someone could have helped him on the creative department.
But let's just stick to the last bit, a simple formula for success. It's quite good. So anyway, he started out by saying, and I want to put this to you, Soph, like how many people do you know that are rich?
Define rich.
That's the question. It's like rich is, he puts it that it's when your burn rate, so what you spend, is less than your passive income. And passive, not what you're earning every day from your salary, because when you retire, you don't have that. So it's like, and he used this
so
really.
It's your asset. So is it basically like if I'm spending $2,000 a week?
Yep.
If I'm getting more than that from my asset, so not my income as in my salary, that's what
you're like
consider rich.
Economically secure, you're rich, like all of that. So he's like, I know people that earn $5 million a year. And he told us a story about his friend. He earns $5 million a year, but he literally spends that much because he's got a house in the Hamptons, he's got kids, he's got chefs, he's got all of this. And it's this whole lifestyle creep that, yes, you can earn more, but if your burn rate or what you're spending also increases, then you're not considered to be rich because you don't have that wealth. And then he talked about his dad who earned like $52,000 a year and he only spends $48,000. So he actually is a lot more rich, but he earns way less. So it's like defining what this like rich is.
Well, it's quite interesting. The idea of defining rich, this is actually something I've wanted to talk to you about for ages, is what is your definition of financial success and what for you is your goal or your enough? Because I think, and just hear me out, because this is something I've thought about lately, is the idea that it's the human condition to want more. It's a part of being in a capitalist, fast-paced, technology-driven society to always be striving for more.
Yeah.
But if you can put in place almost like your enoughness or your goal of what is rich or wealthy or whatever that looks like to you, and really set that and stick with it, I think that, I don't know, I feel like in a way that might stop the constant striving, because I think, you know, if you look at some of the wealthiest people in the world, they probably still don't feel like they have enough. And I don't want to be one of those people who looks back at my life and was always on the search for the next thing rather than being really comfortable and happy with what I've got. And I think unless you actively say to yourself, this is my ceiling, or this is my amount, or this is what I want to be happy or live the kind of life I want, then I think it's this constant never enoughness.
Yeah.
Have you given yourself like I don't know, I mean, I know you've got your retirement or your 20-year holiday goal, but have you ever thought about that? Like for you, what that would look like?
I think for me, I don't have a dollar figure, and that's probably something I should work on. And he actually spoke about this. He said that his always changes though. Like he got to like 10 million and he was like, cool, now I get to 100 million.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
But I think for me, it would be feeling financially secure. It's not about the amount of money that I'm making, it's being financially secure. So it is a case of being rich. So being able to not work, but be living off my assets. That for me, not my tits. So just winked me. Oh God. No, my different kind of assets, my financial assets. I think because there is always going to be a point in our lives where the music stops and we can't earn money. It might be that we want to go on holiday, or we get significantly ill, or we retire, or there's going to be a point where we can no longer earn and we have to have something else to live off. And so the more that you can accumulate that when you're younger and build up those assets, the less scary the future seems.
I know exactly what you mean, and I think for me, even just having an auto payment into my investments is enough for me to feel like, oh, okay, a little bit of a sigh of relief. That's just into my 20-year holiday fund, for me in New Zealand, that's KiwiSaver. But I haven't sat down and thought, this is my
dollar figure.
Yeah, and I really do think actually, maybe it's not necessarily just dollar figure, but it's almost, if I think of all the assets, so say I own a house one day and I have X amount in my, stock portfolio, in my savings, blah, 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 what is that for me?
Because it is about knowing what enough is enough, and it's not a function of what you earn, like economic security or feeling financially secure or free or whatever you want to call it, but it's a function of what you keep and knowing how much is enough.
Do you say
so
what
not
you
spend,
keep,
like what you keep,
what you don't
spend? Yeah, what you invest, what you save, whatever. And then that second part of knowing how much is enough is that nobody cares about how much stuff you have as you do. Do you know what I mean? Like there's this whole thing, and he talked about like influencers are just wealth porn.
Like influencers as in like
Instagram, like social media, it's all wealth porn. And it's like you're looking at it going, oh my God, I want that. I want to be that. I want to have that.
So true.
And you're getting addicted to this fascination.
And do you know the most ironic thing about that is a lot of the time they've been given it for free.
Yeah.
Like they don't actually have the thing.
Or they might be dead up to their eyeballs, or they might be sitting in some fake private jet taking a photo, which I cannot believe is a thing. That there's actually companies out there that sell hour slots for influencers to sit in their private jets, which anyway.
So problematic.
But yeah, so it's not all about making more money. It's about being financially secure and making sure, when the music stops, you can still live the life you want. So he also spoke around.
But do you know, that's quite scary for a lot of people who are employed, or like people might be listening and hear that and think, well, shit, like I'm not putting any of my salary away. So if my salary was to stop, I definitely wouldn't have enough.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Like if you're listening and you're thinking, oh no, like I'm not doing that. it's a good way to think about, you know, salaries aren't forever. Your earning capacity isn't forever. And when that does stop, then what? Because you might be able to keep up with your lifestyle now, but if you're not putting any of that away for your future or the way you want to live in 20, 30 years' time.
Yeah. And it's not trying to fix it now. This is a slow thing. Like economic security and like financial, you don't get it overnight unless you inherit a whole bunch of money, which some people might, and that's great. But like for 99% of us, we're going to have to work away at this slowly. And that might mean asking for a pay rise so then you can invest more and you can get that passive income quicker. Do you know what I mean? So therefore you're investing into assets that can generate income for you down the track rather than just living paycheck to paycheck, which I know is difficult, and I completely appreciate that that's all some people can deal with right now. But I think it's also just being aware of, if the music stopped, how would I fund my lifestyle? And for me, like that was quite scary. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got like a huge mortgage. If we stopped paying ourselves at the curb, like how would I get that? And then I was like, well, no, because I could sell my house and I could live off that. So there is, but it is still a daunting thing to comprehend.
Oh my God, I don't have a house to sell.
But you're saving and putting money away and investing it. So it's like,
it's just a case of sitting down and looking at your incomings and outgoings and being like, what could I realistically not stress about? Is it $5 a week? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000?
Yeah.
It's different for everyone, but I honestly think just the mental load of knowing you're doing something so much better than doing nothing.
And he talks about 3 key things in order to get that economic security or that financial freedom. And the first one is discipline, which is exactly what you're just talking about. You know, you do have to be disciplined if you want to achieve really amazing goals like that. You're not going to get it if you're spending money on clothes all the time. And she sits there wearing a new cardigan. She's like, Dad, no, but within reason, you know. But it's,
I'm pretty good, to be fair. I don't spend heaps of money on clothes, do I?
No.
I'm like waiting for you to reinforce
No, definitely not.
Because my parents think I'm really bad at it, but I really don't think I am.
It's all about developing, I reckon, a savings muscle. You know, you've got to work at it.
It so is.
It's like, it's not just going to come naturally to a whole lot of people. Like I find it difficult at times, but it's like the more you use it, the more powerful and strong it becomes, and you see the benefits.
It's like with a muscle when you start to see it and you're like, shit, yeah, look at that high definition. But it's the same with savings or investing, because as soon as you see that like cumulative growth, whether it be muscle or the amount in your portfolio or whatever, that is motivating.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of for me, like the moment that I had that tax back, which is really kind of a cheat's way, isn't it? You know, like if you get an inheritance or you get a tax back, it's like, for me, that was the first time I had like a lump amount in my account. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. So I all of a sudden was like, I want to protect this.
Yeah.
And I want to make clever decisions to grow that. Like you kind of get it almost addicted to the outcome.
And it does take time. But once you start seeing that, that's when it becomes super powerful, because that's all you want to put your money towards. And you're just like, oh my gosh. But he said that the greatest advantage that young people have is time. And it's so true. And it's something that I wish I could tell myself in my 20s, is that like I had the biggest lifestyle creep. I was earning like great salary. I was living in Sydney. I was spending
You spent a lot on clothes.
Yeah.
Like your wardrobe was insane.
I had no mortgage. I could have saved a lot more and been in a much better financial position. Not saying like that I'm not now, but I just...
Do you regret it?
Totally.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my God, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast, but I went to sell my dog bed. I went to sell Miso's dog bed when I moved to London. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to go back through my emails and see what I paid for this. I paid over 600 Australian dollars for a freaking dog bed.
Which one is this? Is this the white looking one?
Yep. Yeah.
It is quite nice.
It is nice, yeah. And my thinking was, if it's going to be in my lounge, I want it to look nice. But in my head, when I came to sell it now, and I've had a significantly reduced salary, there is just no way in hell that I would ever spend that much money on a dog bed now. But back then it was like, oh, it's fine, no worries. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, Vic, if you had just made a few better decisions like that and not had that lifestyle creep, you would have been in a much better financial position.
I actually saw someone speaking on social media about this yesterday, and she was talking about a moisturizer that she bought, like a really nice one. And she was like, I love it. That now I can't go back to buying my $20 Cetaphil moisturizer. Yeah. It's like, it's much harder to go backwards.
Totally.
And when I say go backwards, it's like almost to downgrade. Like you don't know. And that's why I remember when I was in places like Bali and I look at the standard of living and how they, just concrete floors, it's really basic, but that's all they know and they're really happy, I think they're some of the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
And it's just that idea of like, if you can keep your lifestyle within what you're comfortable with, like if something's really uncomfortable, of course you would spend more, but like, what is the advantage of that? Do you need to go and buy the really expensive moisturizer just because you're earning more money? Probably not.
It's probably really exactly the same ingredients.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the talk of like influencers. It's like, it's a constant reminder of what you've achieved, but also what you haven't achieved. Do you know, you're always comparing yourself to others, and we need to just like remove those, that like porn and that like shit that makes us feel less than, really, and just be like, everyone's on their own journey. But coming back to that point that I was just mentioning, that the greatest advantage that young people have is time. It's like, if you were to give young people, if you told them to put $100 into a box, and then in 30 years' time, that turned into $2,000.
How much?
$2,000.
Into a box?
Yeah. No, you put $100 into a box, and in 30 years' time, they open that box and it's $2,000. Imagine, you'd be putting way more than $100 in that box. You'd be putting $20,000 in that box and converting it to $1 million.
It's like a time capsule.
It's like a time capsule. And it's like, that's exactly what compound interest is. It's a time capsule.
I love that.
So it's like, let's all put as much money as we can now into these boxes. So then when we open them in 30 years' time, we can have economic security. We can have
that's such a good
financial
way to
freedom.
Put it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to maybe teach young people about investing. I mean, 30 years is a long time, but it's just that concept of,
but you can
it's
have
a magic
different time
box.
capsules. You
It's
can
like
just
a
put
genie.
like a 5.
It's like a genie that you rub and then it turns into $2,000.
Yeah. Except you put it in the ground, but i.e. the stock market.
The stock market. Yeah. So
that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, I love that.
I actually have decided I want to like try and tie in like my financial goals with my habits. So I'm going to try and I think I've told you this off podcast, I'm going to try and find some kind of piggy bank.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get a whole lot of pounds out and put them in a little thing. And every time I meditate in the morning or journal or go to a yoga class, all the things that make me feel really good, I give myself money in there. And then at the end of the month, I'll deposit that into my investment. So it's kind of like a double whammy.
I like that.
Yeah, I just think I'm like I'm such a dopamine searcher, and I need the consistency and the like visual aid to help me do things.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of people listening who are like, yeah, I know I want to invest, but like I can't get into the habit or I can't X, Y, Z. I think you kind of have to hack your own brain. It's like hacking your own emotional and brain. Like what's going to work for me? And like, who knows, maybe this won't work for me, but I'm going to try it. Yeah. Because it's all an experiment,
Yeah, I've started putting money into not the stock market, but a manicure pedicure account.
Love that.
And more like a self-care fund.
How much do you put in?
I can spend it on a mani, pedi, facial, whatever, but it's more like self-care.
Yeah.
And I put in, was it £10 every time I exercise in the morning?
That's so good.
Yeah. But it's like, because
that's
I was like,
it's like, you're really shit, that's a lot.
But I need to incentivize that, because if I don't exercise in the morning, it just ruins my whole day.
That's a great way to do it, Vic.
And I get stung if I don't go to Pilates, I have to pay £5, whatever. But like, for me,
I think I'm going to start doing it too.
That's a negative mindset. It's like, oh, I haven't gone, rather than like a positive reframing it, going, when you do go, you get to reward yourself.
I love that.
In multiple ways. Yeah. So it is like finding those little tricks that work for you. And
that's such a good one.
It was someone else that mentioned it to me.
Is that why you're getting so many facials lately?
Just like real fit and look good. It's win.
Real win-win.
Yeah. So the first way to achieve economic security, discipline, and then the other thing that he mentioned was diversify. Now we've spoken about this, but he framed it in a really good way. He was like, diversify as soon as you can. Don't stress yourself out sitting there going, oh my goodness, Mary's invested in property and the stock market. I've invested in the stock market.
That's my toothpaste alarm.
Nice. Brush your teeth?
No, I need to buy toothpaste and I keep forgetting. So what's alarm?
It's like once you've built up your emergency fund, then move on to the stock market. Once you've paid off your debt, then start investing. It's like, try to diversify as soon as you can, but don't try and do it all at once.
Well, it's similar to the idea of auto investing.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't save and invest for dentures in 60 years, a holiday in 5, a house in 7, kids in, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you start somewhere, that's better than being overwhelmed and not doing anything.
Exactly. And he said this quote, which was, it's like, the incremental gain you get on an enormous return is always outweighed by the loss you suffer when you fuck up. So if you fuck up and you make a bad decision, you will remember that for way longer than you will all the great gains you've made. So that's why we always say diversify, and it always feels so much more painful when you lose money than if you grow your money. Do you know what I mean? Like the excitement you get from growing your money will be massively outweighed if you lost all that money in terms of your feelings.
So is it basically the idea that similarly to when people give you heaps of compliments, you always remember the one shitty thing someone said?
Yeah. You go on a million dates and everyone says that you're beautiful and amazing, and then you have one rejection and that's the thing that you hold your hat on.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the same with money. It's like, you could have win, and then the one loss, and that's the thing you remember.
But maybe that's something to be said for...
It's all psychological.
But also needing to celebrate the wins more.
Totally.
Because I think, like in everything. And it's, how everyone bangs on about like, oh, I would never take back this amazing love I had, even though there's a loss in the end, Yeah. Well, it should be the same with everything then, shouldn't it? But it's not for some reason. Whereas it should be like that with money. It's like, well, you've had all these amazing wins.
Yeah.
There's always going to be bad with the good. Like, but that's just life.
Yeah, but that's why it's like diversify, because you don't want to be, you want to have lots of those wins so that when you do have that fuck up,
you can keep going and not be like, I'm never investing again. Or,
you're like, no, I've had a whole lot of good ones. Yeah. So it's trying to like diversify as much as you can. The other thing he mentioned, which I was like, hallelujah, was like, we need to talk more about money. And hearing this from an old white guy was just kind of refreshing. Like, we bang on about it as women, about how we need to talk about money, we need to know the value of ourselves, and like, money is silence and all of that. And just so for someone in such a privileged position that he's in to say that, and he said, not talking about money is precisely what keeps the rich rich and the poor poor. And sadly, it's true. It's the asymmetry of information, and it only benefits those with the symmetry, which is like so true.
It's so powerful.
That's why there's so much jargon, and the finance industry tries to make it confusing for everyone because it's so true. It's
there's a very like clear strategy behind that, and that is to stop it from being information for everyone.
Yeah.
And
I get that if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, and that information or that knowledge is very specified, but understanding how like doctors speak, for example, is not going to change my wealth trajectory, but understanding how a financial advisor speaks, or understanding complex words when it comes to investing or wealth creation, is going to change my life. So it's
also different though if you think about like, differently to a doctor, like talking about your body is not necessarily something you need to know in everyday life, but we use money every day, all the time. It doesn't matter if it's not your career, like law. You might not need to know everything about law, but you're not using law in your everyday life, whereas you're using money in everyday life. There's a huge difference in the gate-kept information in different areas.
Yeah.
But like, it really is the disadvantaged. Like, the people who are disadvantaged the most are those who need that information the most.
100%.
So as much as sometimes when you're in a position of privilege to say we should talk about money, or talking about money feels awkward because you have money, it's like you're actually doing everyone a service by talking about it, because you're sharing that knowledge. It's really interesting because we've recently given ourselves a pay rise, and I found myself feeling like...
Soph didn't even know. She was like... Sorry, that sounds really bad. No, it was.
To be fair, you could have told me.
No, I know, but I kind of was just, part of me was probably like, hee hee.
Yeah, I reckon you were secretly like, anyway, I was like, we were out having a drink last weekend, and I was like, I was like, when are we going to get a pay rise? Like, and she was like, we got one. And I was like,
good to know someone's living paycheck to paycheck. I was like,
no, but like, because we've been not paying ourselves like we've kind of been a bit weird with our payments lately. I kind of thought maybe I was owed money or something. Anyway, but it was interesting because I noticed my own like internal dialogue around the idea of like, oh, well, I probably shouldn't talk about having a pay rise because now I'm on actually okay money, you know, and maybe and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly the whole point. But also, you know, in reverse, when you were earning really, really good money working in finance and you were like, no, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to make other people feel bad.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, it's not as though we're like creaming it, but we're not like, you know, really below average.
No. But it's
it's just funny how it makes the psychology around not wanting to make other people feel worse or boast or it's not as though we're like, I don't know. It's just, it's interesting. And I noticed it about myself being like, oh, I don't know if I want to. And I was like, no, Sophie.
No, I will be shouting from the rooftops. No, but it's more the fact that also you can't become good at anything if you're not talking about it. If you were like, look, I want to become a really good physical engineer and you decided to not speak to anyone, not go to any classes, not go, you know, like you're becoming good at something, you need to go and talk to people and leverage off their smarts and like, I don't know.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because like, I think this is actually something you've gotten so much better at in terms of asking for help and also talking openly because it's not really, it's almost like we're not conditioned or told that's a good idea. But weirdly, it is something I've always done. I've always really loved talking to people and like, I don't know, but it does, it's almost like it shows weakness because you don't know the answer to something, right? Yeah. But I think, you know, even just small things like I love the idea of couples therapy because I think unless you, like you're not often taught how to like communicate in a relationship or even just with friends or family. Like you're kind of brought up just thinking you should know how to do X, Y, Z. But if you don't have like people that are even better or have knowledge that could help you do things more, you know, it's more the idea that you can collect tools and know-how from people that are better at those things.
And they can help you get to your goal quicker. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're...
Yeah, because you don't make the mistakes that...
Yeah, and you're learning from their mistakes and you're giving you expertise of the best way to do things or whatever, you can achieve your goals much faster, whether they're financial or what. Like it's, and then one other thing you mentioned was that money can buy happiness, which...
I love this. I saw this as a note. I can't remember, you must have written it somewhere. But I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, he's like, but he caveats it with like, to an extent. And I agree. I think money can buy happiness, but it has like diminishing returns. So someone earning £40,000, you give them an extra 20,000, so they're now on £60,000, they're going to be a lot happier.
That's about 120, 130 New Zealand and Australian money.
Yeah, I mean, it's more the proportion. You know, like you're someone on $40,000, you increase their salary to $60,000, they're going to be a lot more happy. If you were on $8 million and you increase that to 15 million, probably not going to move the needle.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's like that's not really going to move the needle.
Yeah, okay.
But so it can buy happiness to an extent. You get to a certain point, and I don't know what that is. It's probably different for everyone, but it starts diminishing the happiness returns effectively.
I definitely think something I've noticed is that I don't think I ever understood the time versus money thing. You know, people are like, time is money. I'm like, what does that mean? But now, you know, being able to spend my time in ways that I value and doing the things that I love. It's choice, isn't it? It's like you can choose. But I guess it's similar to business, right? Like for us, even in the curve, it's like whether you're good at it or you like it, you can start to structure whether it be your job or your life around and outsource the things that, you're either not good at or don't like.
And when we started, we had to do it all. We had to do everything, even the stuff we didn't like. But we did it because we didn't have the capital or the money to pay other people. And now we can really pick and choose what we want to do and hire other people for the stuff we don't. It's exactly the same in your everyday life.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah. Money can buy happiness to an extent. And then he also spoke of, I think it has an even more negative effect when you get even more wealthy because it starts impacting your children and the way that they're brought up and their perceptions of money. And
interesting.
He's like, I don't want to leave my kids a lot of money because I want them to know the value of $1 and all of that. And it's kind of coming back to like what Warren Buffett said around he's not leaving any inheritance to his kids. And so I agree, it can definitely have a negative effect. Like I know a lot of people that have been brought up with a lot of money and are probably quite unhappy.
I mean, it would be kind of cool if there was like if almost like generational wealth or inheritance was just not a thing. Like culturally, that's just completely gone, so that everyone's kind of on similar playing fields. Your life is your chance to choose how you spend and earn money, rather than it just be like dictated on ancestors from 4 generations earlier, you know?
I know, yeah. Also, I'd be pissed off if I was like a hardworking grandma and then my great-great-grandchildren was just
little
like
shits running around getting manicures all the time.
I'd be like, excuse me.
Do you know what your granny did?
Yeah. Another way to think of like wealth or like economic security, he puts it as it's the absence of economic worry. And I think that is quite powerful. And he spoke, and I'm honestly like bringing me to tears. He spoke about when he grew up, he didn't have a lot of money, and he grew up with a single mum, and she worked like 3 jobs, and like he left his jacket on the school bus or something, and it was like a 30-pound jacket, and he got home, his mum was like, that's fine, like she was pretty annoyed. And then he always lost stuff, and then he lost it again, and he came home and he was so scared to tell his mum because he knew that like they couldn't afford a new jacket. So he described it's like this money was like this ghost that followed them around all day, every day. And he was like, it was like this whole shame around not having enough. And he was like, people that have never not had money will never understand. Like he was like, you just don't understand the ghost that's there all the time. And he's like, there was this one time at soccer, and after soccer, all the kids went and got ice cream. Like that was just the thing they did. And his mum would always shuffle them into the car really quickly and be like, we don't have time. We've got to go somewhere else. Like, and he didn't know until he was a bit older that it was because they didn't have money for ice cream. You know, like it was like this constant thing. And I was just like, my heart was breaking. I was like, gosh, it's so true. You never understand the hardships that some people go through if you've never experienced that. And so it's like, but I think, yeah, economic security is the absence of economic worry. It's like you don't want to be worrying about not being able to afford things or not being able to purchase things or buy those necessities. And so it's just like we try to talk about it in a positive light, but having economic wealth and having economic like financial freedom and all of that. But it's really just like you just don't want the other side of the equation. And so it's trying to flip it on its head in a bit more of a aspirational positive light. But yeah, it's like
I think it's such a powerful lesson, and it's so true. And I think what I don't think that does is it doesn't take away from if you've had a somewhat privileged upbringing and your relationship with money is still one that's quite anxious, you know, or it's not a case of saying, oh, well, I could always have ice cream as a kid and therefore like I should be blah, blah, blah. I think the way that money and our upbringings and our parents and the way they talk about it, all of that stuff is so like deeply rooted. But I mean, like I feel that stress with myself, but I have no kids. I have no, you know, I'm not letting anyone else down by not having enough. I couldn't imagine that feeling and having kids. Yeah. And also I think it comes down to like the driving force and how some people, you know, like this is kind of maybe a weird example, but you know, if some parents smoke heaps, the kids either smoke heaps or like never want to touch a cigarette in their life. And it's like, you just never know how things, your childhood, how you experience, whether it be money or otherwise, will show up in adulthood. And I guess, unless you've experienced that ghost of feeling like
that shame around money.
You might have, it's
the money ghost.
I really just think it's probably like a nice reminder for everyone listening and for us to remember.
Like be compassionate, but you never know what financial situation people have been through, what they're in. Yeah, you just...
There's so much complexity. Like a friend of mine a while ago was like, gosh, I've got this one friend that just... She always kind of complains about the restaurant being expensive, and she sort of said to me, you know, like I feel a little bit like, does she think we all are like rolling in it or something? Because we're all struggling, you know. But I was like, I think every time you feel frustrated with someone else's money story, and this is a good reminder for me too, I'm kind of talking to myself, is to like just, always try and come from a place of compassion rather than like judgy, because it's hard sometimes.
Definitely.
Even I was at a dinner the other day like a lunch, and I really didn't want to pay for everyone's alcohol, and I just like felt too awkward. Anyway, whatever, it was fine. It wasn't a big deal. But I felt ashamed for asking my friend. Like I text her while at the table being like, do you reckon you could help me? And I just really don't want to pay for everyone's alcohol. And I was like, I felt really embarrassed about it more. But it's like, you know, if you're on the other side of anything like that, just like trying to be kind, because
no, definitely. I'd feel terrible if someone's paying for my alcohol and be like,
but just in general, whether that's alcohol, whether that's like someone complaining about this or not paying you back for this, like there's probably always a deeper story.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. And then lastly, I'm just on this. He's American and he now lives in Europe. And he was talking to a bunch of British people, and someone asked him, like, what are your views with like British versus American? And he's like, British people are way less comfortable talking about money, which we have definitely noticed.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just said there's this more transparent attitude towards money in the US, which has meant that they're a more innovative nation. They're just more ambitious when it comes to like money, business, all of that. Anyway, he's like,
is it ambitious, or is it just like that they own it?
They just
out
own
loud?
it, yeah. And it's probably but I think it's a great example of like a nation that talks about money and what they've achieved versus a nation that doesn't.
Actually, that's
and
so
what they
true.
Have, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, the UK has achieved great things, but in terms of.
And also America and, lots of things going on, obviously. But
yes, but.
No, but you're right. From an economic standpoint, it's.
Yeah.
Interesting to see the flow and effects of what culturally, when you're really open and outward about money, how that can flow on.
Yeah. And he's just like, the UK has a really talented bunch of charming people who just serve other people's wealth. He's like, there's no wealth creation in the UK. They're not making money themselves. They're just managing other people's money.
Oof.
And it was
How did the crowd respond? Was everyone like...
But it was kind of like, he's making huge generalization, but it's so true. It's like, this is a financial hub here in London, but it's literally, you're managing other people's money, I don't know. It was quite funny. And then he said, it might be Cambridge that produces really groundbreaking intellectual property, for example, but it's monetized in America. It's like that kind of example of, it's like the US is the best place to make money, Europe's the best place to spend it. It's kind of like his analogy. And I was like, oh my God, so true.
So true.
We're moving to the US, so I was like, gosh, we need to make more money over there. But,
Well, I've even noticed it about myself and about us as a business. The more open we can be talking about money from a business perspective, it's similar to like asking for help, whether it's to do with like how to do your makeup or how to like find XYZ or learn about law or whatever it is that you're trying to learn about.
Yeah.
It's like the more open you can be, the more you get back. And I've noticed that for us from the curve, like the more we can talk about where we're at and what we're trying to do,
totally,
the more people can help make it happen.
And that definitely took me time. I was like, no, we can't share any of our trade secrets. It's like, girl, you're not that much of a big deal.
Yeah.
No one's trying to steal
that.
you. Yeah.
I must tell you, like, I'm not feeling inspired to read the book.
Okay. Yeah. No,
but I'm glad that you got a lot out of it.
Synopsis it for
and
me.
And the synopsis that you got, I think, was inspiring.
So if you do want to read the book, it's called The Algebra of Wealth, A Simple Formula for Success by Scott Galloway.
We'll put the link maybe in the podcast show notes.
Yes. Good idea.
I quite like the book reviews. I feel like this could be a bit of a regular thing.
I do love reading. It also makes me, I find sometimes when I read books, I'm like, what was that chapter about? It makes me
think about it more.
Think about it, yeah. And actually take note of what's in it. If I'm like, gosh, I have to put this on a podcast. Yeah.
I loved it. Thanks heaps.
No worries.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.